Hi, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. Welcome to this daily news briefing or news broadcast on Russia sanctions, where we're going to try to make sense about the latest sanctions coming out of different countries. My name is Saskia Rietbroek, and I'm Executive Director of the Association of Certified Sanction Specialists. And I'm coming to you live from the Netherlands. We will guide you in this broadcast what is happening in the world of sanctions and why it matters for your business. And we'll be doing this every workday at 5 p.m. Amsterdam time. So for the next 20 minutes, we'll do this. We'll have some time for questions at the end as well, so you can always include them in the chat. So, lots of things going on. It's certainly very hard to keep track. I'm sure, you're probably a business person, man or woman, who has to deal with all kinds of things, right? Paying bills and HR issues, getting new clients, managing employees. You may be a compliance officer, but even then you may have to deal with different regulatory issues in addition to sanctions. So you can possibly keep up with all these sanctions. I have a hard time keeping up with all the sanctions, and this is all I do. So imagine that. So let's dive into what is the latest news on sanctions. It's now 5 p.m. Here in the Netherlands. I didn't see any sanctions coming out today. But yesterday, a lot of things happened, and in previous days as well. So I'm going to cover some of them because there's not enough time to cover them all. So I try to list some of the most important things that have happened. So first of all, yesterday, there was a major development in the European Union. They cut off 7 Russian banks from SWIFT. These banks were Bank Odkriti, Novicom Bank, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the names here, Promsvyash Bank, Rosia Bank, Sovcom Bank, VEB Bank, and VTB Bank. In addition to the entities that they own, directly or indirectly, they are also will also be cut off from SWIFT. So in my opinion, the only major bank affected here is VTB. Why? Because the VEB and PSB, they were already placed by the US on the so-called game over sanctions list, namely the specially designated nationals list. And so they were already cut off from international business. And the other banks already had their funding restricted as well. So one bank is missing here that has not been cut off from SWIFT, and that's Sber Bank. They have been spared. Notably, there were some other sanctions imposed on them earlier. But these 7 banks that I just mentioned, they were cut off. And they get 10 days notice. So it's not effective immediately, but on March 12th, they can no longer send messages through SWIFT. So as of that day, it's going to be much harder, if not impossible, for these Russian banks and their customers to send money in and out of Russia and through other countries as well, because they have subsidiaries in different parts of the world. So this is a sanction with a big impact on both Russian companies and Western companies that do business with companies that bank with these listed banks. So they can no longer send or receive money to customers of these 7 banks that I just mentioned. So those were the SWIFT sanctions, and feel free to comment about this in the chat. I'm always wondering what people think of it and what they're doing about it right now. This is a very recent development, of course. So what else? What happened yesterday as well in the EU is that they issued sanctions on a fund called the Russian Direct Investment Fund, or DIF. This is a government-owned fund. and it's considered a slush fund for Putin and his cronies. It's really an emblematic for Russia's broader kleptocracy, I think. And the US, the EU is not the first ones doing this. This was already done by the United States a couple of days ago. I think it was on February 28th. They also issued sanctions, blocking sanctions on this fund. So what else has happened? Yesterday as well was a busy day. The EU also prohibited to sell, supply, transfer, or export euro banknotes to Russia or to any person in Russia or entity in Russia, including the government and the central bank, etc., for any use in Russia. So really, like, no more euros for you. That was the message. The EU also did some other things. They banned media outlets, RT and Russia Today and Sputnik from broadcasting in the European Union. And I think also very important, they also imposed sanctions, this is all the EU, on several military persons in the Belarus, and other further restrictions on the Belarus. You may remember that Belarus under President Lukashenko, they have already faced several rounds, I think 5 rounds of EU sanctions since 2020, when the president suppressed protests in Belarus after winning the election. So these are not new. I mean, there are new sanctions, but there's like a next round of sanctions that already existed on Belarus. And the new sanctions that came out yesterday on Belarus include new restrictions on the trade of goods used for production, manufacturing on a bunch of products, tobacco products, mineral fuels, some product that I cannot pronounce, bituminous substances. These are products, I understand, used to build roads, certain hydrocarbon products, potash, which is for fertilizers, wood products, cement, iron, steel, rubber. So these were very broad sanctions that restricted trade of goods for these products to Belarus. So, and then there were some additional sanctions on Belarus affecting the export of dual-use goods and technology. So this was just yesterday, right? So what else happened? If you look 2 days ago, it seems like an eternity. We saw the UK, this was March 1, they put sanctions, so-called correspondent banking or clearing sanctions on Russia's largest bank. Remember, I said earlier that this bank was spared with the SWIFT sanctions? Well, they already got their share of sanctions 2 days ago. The UK put these correspondent banking or clearing sanctions on them. So that means that a UK bank can no longer open so-called correspondent banking relationships with this bank. And they can also no longer process pound sterling payments to or from this largest Russian bank. Now, there is a grace period for these sanctions. They are allowed until March 31st, so until the end of this month. So they gave them 1 month. But in fact, it means that the largest Russian bank can no longer process pound sterling transactions for their customers. The US did the same a couple of days earlier, also with the grace period until the end of March. They also said that Sberbank can no longer, they placed them on a so-called CAPTA list. This is a different list than the SDN list. This is the correspondent bank and payable through account list. And it basically means that this bank, Sberbank, can no longer conduct US dollar clearing transactions in the United States, can no longer do any transactions in US dollars, and can no longer have correspondent banking accounts in the United States. So for those of you who are not bankers, a correspondent banking account is really like banks banking with each other. So they're not normal retail accounts, but these are accounts that foreign banks have with US banks or EU banks or UK banks. Banks banking with each other, and they use these accounts to process dollar or pound or euro transactions for their customers. So the effect of these clearing or correspondent banking sanctions is that the largest Russian bank can no longer conduct dollar nor pound transactions for its customers. The EU has not issued these sanctions yet on the Sberbank. But anyway, it's already a very powerful impact that will hurt this bank and its business because it can no longer conduct pound or US dollar transactions. So what else? We're not done yet. We have other impactful sanctions that were issued by the EU earlier last week, in fact. And that includes a novel type of sanctions that restrict deposits from Russian persons over of 100,000 euros or more at EU banks. And it's sort of, I'm not sure how this is going to be interpreted. Can you no longer, do you have to see who has already deposits that are over 100,000? And do you have to give that money back? I don't think so. I spoke with a couple of banks. They're not interpreting it like that. I heard that BaFin, the German regulator, has come out with some sort of guidance. I looked at it on their website and I haven't found that guidance. So if anybody has that, and if it's public, please share with in the comments a link or anything, or it would be very helpful to get some sort of guidance, because this is a sanction that will have a practical impact for many banks in Europe. So these were some of the sanctions that I wanted to mention. And sometimes I'm asked, do these sanctions, will they stop Putin? I think Putin has had a long time to prepare for this, right? Since 2014, there were already sanctions being imposed after he annexed the Crimea. So, I think one thing he may have underestimated is that how countries that did not impose sanctions on Russia in the past, like Switzerland, Singapore, South Korea, have now announced that they will issue them as well, or have already done so. And of course, if more countries impose sanctions, that will have a bigger impact. The sanctions will be more effective because it's harder to get around them and try to do business with countries that haven't imposed sanctions. You will also see a shift, I think, in how companies are reacting in general, or feeling in general, about doing business with Russia. Because of the invasion, there will be Western companies and other companies in Asia who will feel uncomfortable doing business with Russia. We already see companies like Shell and BP and some others leaving Russian projects. And we have to see what China does. I think that will be, we have to wait and see. Russia may be able to keep on receiving goods that they need to keep their economy going from China, but we'll have to see what China does in the longer term. If anybody has comments on that as well, that would be great. So what are some of the things you can be doing now, right? You should be doing now. I guess you have to, of course, evaluate your exposure to Russia on a very practical level. Previously, most of the sanctions were really like these sectoral sanctions. Now they're a lot broader. You have to see, how you are dealing with that. If you're an importer or exporter, maybe you won't be able to sign new contracts. New sanctions can prevent the delivery of the goods. Possibly you won't be able to get paid, right? So that's another thing. All companies, doing business with Russia, it means that you may not be able to execute on contracts that you already signed. And you should analyze your operations as well, which particular sanctions apply to you, right? EU, UK, US, others, which ones are applicable to your business, because they do differ per country, and you need to know what applies to you and your business. Of course, one of the things that you should be doing is due diligence, right? Screen your business relations and counterparties for potential hits against the sanctions list. If you're in compliance, you're very familiar with that. If you're not in compliance, this is something that you should definitely be doing, because you cannot do business with all these clients or entities or counterparties that have been placed on these lists. One thing, don't wait for your bank to catch it, right? If you're an importer, exporter, or I don't know, manufacturing company, maritime shipping companies, they sometimes say, well, we're going to wait for our bank to catch it and then we'll take action. Then it's too late. You have your own responsibility to scrutinize these transactions. And if your bank catches it, they may actually close your account. So be very careful with that and do your own due diligence. For those of you who do business in these two provinces in the Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk, there have been very broad, like comprehensive sanctions imposed on these territories. And if you're not sure that if you're doing business there, you can look at cities or postal codes that you can find in your know your customer documents or business dealings to see if there's any cities or postal codes from these provinces, because then you really have to take a look if you can still do the business. Those sanctions were very broad. It's not list based. It's really just it affects a whole province. And there's ways to find this out. You can go online and find these zip codes or urban settlements or districts with these codes. So conduct due diligence. There's a lot of things you can do, other things as well, but it's a long process, and I wish you all good luck with this. I'm sure that the regulators will be quite strict with respect to Russia, and more strict than they were in the past. So there will be a lot of challenges for financial institutions and companies in both Russia and the West. So let's see if there are some questions in the chat. Or comments, right? Yeah, there's Savia says there's a special OFAC FAQ with a graph on how to, what kind of transactions are prohibited. This came out, I think, very recently, maybe yesterday. So it is a great way to check. It's a great idea to check those FAQs from the OFAC website. Let me see what else. We have a couple of. Okay, there's one question about Donetsk and Luhansk. The Russians only occupy parts of these provinces, at least for now. Do the sanctions affect these entire provinces? I think they affect the entire provinces. So not only parts that they are actually occupying right now. And those were both EU and US sanctions that came out on these provinces. So you may want to check for these details. Either the OFAC website of US Treasury, or OFSI, the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation, the EU website, Concilium, or the EU Council page of the EU website. Let me see what else. If there's a couple of questions, we're almost running out of time. One person says you could demand to have a field in SWIFT payment to indicate full physical address and connect it to the administrative names blacklist in a screening system. That's a great suggestion. So thank you so much. There's one person that's asking, can you please expand on the grace period? At first blush, it appears that these 30 days diminishes the impact. Yeah, I think that it's definitely, if you have a grace period, the bad guys can, take their money out, but the good guys also have an opportunity to do some transactions that they were working on and continue to do business. So, and sort of, wrap it up before they get stuck in this situation. So I think there's two sides to that. It also takes some time, I guess, operationally in a bank to implement all these measures. There's a lot of things going on. They're trying to, I know, some of you in compliance, they're working like without stop right now. So it's quite a hard time. And don't forget to breathe if you're working in compliance. So I want to thank you all. We're going to be back tomorrow, same time. And please visit our website, sanctionsassociation.org. And we hope to see you tomorrow again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.